I used to think the worst kind of betrayal was the loud, obvious kind, the cheating, the screaming fights, the dramatic exits. I didn't know the quiet kind existed. The kind that builds slowly, brick by brick, until one day you realize the life you trusted someone else to help you build was never really yours. I met Daniel when I was 26 in Chicago. I had just started working as a junior architect at a mid-sized firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. Late nights drafting, arguing over designs, drinking bad office coffee with coworkers who felt like friends. Daniel was older, 33 at the time, and already established. He worked in finance, wore tailored suits, and had that calm, confident energy that made people listen when he spoke. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. I remember he sat across from me and spent half the night asking questions about my work, actually listening, not just waiting to talk about himself. That alone felt rare. By the end of the night, he walked me to my car and said, "You're building something real." That's refreshing. It sounds small, but it stuck with me. We started dating a week later. At first, everything felt steady in a way I wasn't used to. Daniel wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he was reliable. He called when he said he would. He showed up on time. He remembered details, my favorite Thai place, how I hated driving in the rain, the fact that I always double-checked my locks before bed. 6 months in, I moved into his condo in River North. It was modern, clean, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. That made me feel like I had somehow skipped 10 steps ahead in life. Think of it as ours, he told me when I hesitated about moving in. I wanted to believe that. The first shift was subtle. It didn't feel like control at the time. It felt like guidance. "You don't need to work those crazy hours," he said one night when I came home exhausted. "You're underpaid for the effort you're putting in." "I'm still learning," I said. "That's part of it," he shrugged. "Or you could be smarter about it." I laughed it off, but then it became a pattern. When I talked about staying late to finish a project, he'd frown. When I got excited about a new assignment, he'd point out the downsides. When I mentioned wanting to apply for a more competitive firm, he'd say, "Those places burn people out. You'll hate it." At first, I thought he was just looking out for me. Over time, I started second-guessing myself. A year into our relationship, he brought up the idea of me quitting my job. "Just for a bit," he said. "Take a break. You're stressed all the time." I remember sitting on the couch, staring at him. "I don't know. I like working." "I'm not saying forever," he said quickly. "Just recalibrate. Figure out what you really want. I can cover everything." That word, everything, landed heavier than I expected. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio. My parents worked hard for everything. Independence wasn't just encouraged. It was expected. So the idea of relying on someone financially made me uncomfortable. "I don't want to be dependent on you," I said. "You wouldn't be," he replied. "We're a team." That word again. A team. It sounded right. Eventually, after weeks of conversations and gentle pressure, I agreed to take a temporary break. I told myself it was just a few months. At first, it felt freeing. I slept in. I went to the gym during the day. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Daniel seemed happy. He'd come home and ask about my day, kiss my forehead, tell me I looked more relaxed. "You needed this," he'd say. And for a while, I believed him. But then the tone started to change. Small comments at first. "You spent $120 at Target today? I thought you were cooking more at home. Do you really need another pair of shoes?" They weren't harsh, just pointed. I started keeping receipts, explaining purchases before he asked. I didn't notice when it shifted from partnership to permission. About 6 months in, I brought up going back to work. "I think I'm ready," I said one night over dinner. "I've been looking at some openings." He didn't respond right away. Just kept eating. Finally, he said, "Why?" I blinked. "What do you mean, why?" "You're doing fine," he said. "We're doing fine. Why add stress back into your life?" "Because I want to," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I miss it," he leaned back in his chair. "Or maybe you're just bored." That stung more than I expected. "I'm not bored. I like having my own thing." "You have your own thing," he said. "This life. Our life." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. "I still want to work," I said quietly. He sighed, like I was being difficult. If you really want to, fine, but don't expect me to pick up the slack when you're stressed again. I didn't even know what that meant. Still, I started applying, but things had changed more than I realized. The gap on my resume raised questions. The industry had moved forward. Software had updated. Standards had shifted. Interviews that would have been easy a year ago suddenly felt out of reach. I got rejection after rejection, each one chipped away at me. Daniel didn't help. Maybe this is a sign, he'd say. Maybe you're not meant to go back. Why force something that clearly isn't working? I started believing him. Around that time, he suggested something else. You could help me instead, he said. I've been thinking about starting a small real estate investment side project. Nothing huge, just smart moves. You've got the design eye. I've got the financial side. It sounded interesting, and more importantly, it sounded like purpose. What would I do? I asked. Scouting properties, helping with renovations, staging, that kind of thing, he said. We could build something together. Together. That word pulled me back in, so I said yes. At first, it felt exciting. We'd drive around different neighborhoods looking at fixer-uppers. I'd sketch renovation ideas, pick finishes, plan layouts. Daniel handled the numbers, the negotiations, the paperwork. He told me not to worry about the legal side. I've got it covered, he said. It's easier if everything's under my name anyway. Cleaner for taxes. I didn't question it. That was my mistake. Over the next 2 years, we flipped 4 properties, and they did well, really well. The first one made about $40,000 profit. The second, closer to $70,000. By the third, we were moving faster, thinking bigger. I poured myself into it. Long days on site, dealing with contractors, picking materials, managing timelines. It felt like I had my career back, just in a different form. Friends would ask what I did, and I'd say, I work with my partner in real estate. It sounded legitimate. It felt legitimate. Daniel would even introduce me that way sometimes. This is Lauren. She's the creative brain behind our projects. I held on to that, but there were cracks I ignored, like how I never saw full financial statements, or how decisions would sometimes be made without me, or how. When I asked questions, the answers were always just vague enough to shut the conversation down. Don't stress about that part, he'd say. That's my lane. I stayed in mine until everything fell apart. It was a random Tuesday. I had just gotten back from a property we were renovating in Logan Square. I was covered in dust, my hair in a messy bun, mentally going over tile options. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen island with his laptop open. He looked off, tense. We need to talk, he said. That phrase instantly made my stomach drop. I set my bag down slowly. Okay, he closed his laptop. Took a breath. I've been thinking about this for a while, he said. And I don't think this is working anymore. For a second, I didn't understand. What? What isn't working? This, he said, gesturing between us. Us. The room felt like it tilted. Where is this coming from? I asked, my voice already shaking. I need something different, he said. I've outgrown this. Like I was a phase. Is there someone else? I asked. He hesitated. That was enough of an answer. My chest tightened. How long? It doesn't matter, he said quickly. It matters to me. He ran a hand through his hair. A few months, while we were working together. While we were building something I thought was ours, I felt sick. So what? You're just leaving? I asked. I think it's best, he said. For both of us. Best for you, I said. He didn't deny it. I looked around the condo, the place I had lived in for nearly 4 years. My name's not on anything, is it? I asked quietly. He didn't respond. That silence said everything. The condo? His the properties? His the accounts? His everything we built. Legally, it was all his. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't do anything wrong, he said. We agreed on how things were set up, did we? Or did I just not question it? I worked on those houses, I said. I put in time, effort, and I compensated you, he cut in. My head snapped up. Compensated me? You didn't have expenses, he said. I covered everything, housing, food, lifestyle. That was part of the deal. The deal, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I gave you years of my life, I said. And I gave you stability, he replied. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly broke. Within 2 weeks, I was out. I packed my things into boxes while he was at work. What little I actually owned felt insignificant: clothes, books, a few personal items, no assets. No savings to speak of. No recent job history. I moved into a small studio apartment in a less trendy part of the city. It had one window facing a brick wall and a radiator that clanked all night. It was nothing like the life I had been living, and it was entirely mine. The first few weeks were brutal. I cried a lot. Not just over him, but over everything I had lost. My independence, my career momentum, my sense of control. I kept replaying conversations in my head, trying to pinpoint where I should have pushed back, asked more questions, protected myself. But hindsight doesn't fix anything. It just makes the mistakes clearer. Eventually, I had to face reality. I needed a job. Starting over at 30 wasn't what I had planned, but there wasn't another option. I updated my resume, trying to frame the past few years in a way that didn't sound like I had just disappeared. Independent residential project management, I wrote. It wasn't entirely a lie. Interviews were awkward at first. So these projects, who were they under? One hiring manager asked. My partner at the time handled the financial side, I said carefully. What was the company name? There wasn't one. I saw the doubt in their eyes. Still, I kept going, rejection after rejection again, but this time, I didn't have Daniel's voice in my head telling me to stop. After about 3 months, I finally got an offer, a small design build firm, lower salary than I'd hoped, but a real opportunity. On my first day, sitting at a desk that was actually mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. About a year later, I drove past one of the properties Daniel and I had worked on. It had just sold. There was a sold sign out front, and I recognized the staging immediately, my layout, my choices. For a second, the old anger flared up. Then it faded, because for the first time, I didn't feel like I had lost everything. I had lost a version of my life that was never really secure to begin with. But I had gained something else, myself, and no one could quietly take that away again.